So these last couple of texts have been very difficult for me. Not only am I kind of out of my element because I have preached more social justice type of language than I am used to in the pulpit, but also I feel out of my element because I keep wondering, where is my part in all of this chaos that is happening right now? Last week, we talked a little bit about our wounds, and that we all carry wounds in this world. But the people who are now being discriminated against in cities and across our country have these wounds that not only are infected but are deep and have gotten deeper through the generations of that systemic racism. And so that even know that we carry wounds ourselves, and we try to rationalize those experiences that we have, we can't understand exactly how they are feeling. And that we have to recognize that the body of Christ is wounded. And that we can't all be united as loving disciples until we together fix that wound. To not put a Band-Aid on it, to not try to cover it up, but to take out the infection and to sew up that wound and to protect that wound until it is healed. It is a process that will not happen tomorrow or the next day or the next week or even the next year. It will happen slowly and surely, but it's up to us to continue to love our neighbors as disciples of Christ. And yet, what I want to talk today is that we acknowledge that there are wounds that we cannot understand, but it is also important to understand our own wounds today. We all carry wounds, and yet they are all painful. We all come from very different life experiences, and there are things that annoy us more than others based on those experiences that we've had. During this text, I was trying to find out, where was the hope in it? Where is the hope in this gospel today? And so hopefully by the end of this sermon, we can together find that out. I have heard this message when I was growing up. What would Jesus do? And that is such a high benchmark to reach, right? Because Jesus sometimes has his moments, has his vulnerability moments. One of my favorite vulnerability moments of Jesus was in the Gospel of John. I had to go through all the 4 Gospels before I got to John. The Gospel of John in the wedding of Canaan, when there was no wine left and people were wondering what to do, and his mother Mary came up to Jesus and said, "Listen, we need more wine." And Jesus, as the teenager, was like, "Yeah, not today." And yet Mary convinced him, and Mary brought Jesus alongside her, and Jesus performed that miracle so that they could have that wine in that wedding. So there are times where Jesus is vulnerable. Maybe another time is when Jesus was praying in the garden, asking God if there was another way other than him being crucified, other than him enduring that pain and that suffering and that neglect from his loved ones. Yet, we try to be like Jesus, but we fall short. What I think is more appropriate is us being as God's 12 disciples. And God's 12 disciples are not perfect. And their wounds shine through on what they do. When I say, what would the disciples do? Who are the disciples? One of the ways that I describe them is, if you just take 20 minutes in our playground and be with our Sunday school, or not Sunday school kids, our preschool kids, where you have them all chaotically running around, running into each other. with them blaming each other, saying, "It wasn't me, it wasn't me, teacher, it wasn't me." Maybe they would bite each other. Maybe they would scream and yell and cry. "So-and-so is not playing with me. So-and-so took what I was playing with." That is what disciples are like in the story. It might not be the most glamorous thing to be described as that, but we are reminded that Jesus, as the teacher, just like the teacher in that playground, is there continually loving them, supporting them, and telling them they are loved and everything will be okay. When I was a para, I was partnered with a third grader, and boy, did he have ADD. And he would run around the playground, and in the playground there was this massive cone, right, that was covering up either a hole or maybe something that was sticking up from the ground, and people were just running by it. But of course, my third grader puts that cone on top of his head and starts running around like a mad person. And so I'm going to just make up a name. I'm going to call him Timmy. I'm like, "Timmy, come here, take that cone off your head." And he runs right behind the swing set. And he runs behind the swing set directly parallel. And he's running to me with this massive cone on his head. And he doesn't see that person swinging on the swing set and going up and then coming down. And for the first time in my life, I had a vision of the next 10 seconds of his life, where he was running across behind the swing set, and that person was swinging and coming down and just clocked him. Just took him off his feet. The cone went flying, he went flying. He started crying. I started internally laughing. But isn't that what life is? Where we don't know what happens in the future, and sometimes we just get blindsided. And those wounds are created, and other wounds are healed but create scars. But we have to recognize that those wounds hurt. It is really hard for us to recognize those wounds hurt, especially when we are proud Germans, right? That we try to say we're going to stay tough. That we cannot show a sign of weakness because we have to be strong and pull ourselves up from our bootstraps. However, it's those deep wounds where we feel the resentment, where we feel the jealousy towards other people, where we look at other people's lives and we say we don't have enough and they have everything. How many times have you been on Facebook or read on the paper or just seen someone on the street with a nice car or nice clothes, or you think that they just have the perfect family? I fall into that trap too, where I see a friend buying a new house or a new car or have had that new child in their life, and I just think, what if I could just have that, right? What if I could just have that little thing, everything will be put back together. And yet, that's not how life works, isn't it? God sent his Son into this world because this world isn't perfect. That we all don't measure up to our own expectations or our own timeline in this world. Where we expect to be perfect, we expect to get that new promotion, that we expect to be respected the way that we expect us to, and we simply don't. When we're talking about our own vulnerability, and we're talking about sinfulness and brokenness in this world, what we have to remember is that hurt people hurt people. That we need to be honest about our own vulnerability, because we can't help each other unless we help ourselves first. That we need to tend to our own needs, that we need to tend to our own brokenness and our own wounds, so that we have the understanding and the humility of each other's pain. That we are vulnerable for ourselves, and that we feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable for each other, so that we can understand what pain truly feels like and be comfortable in it and lean into it, so that when we get into a situation where we see people in pain and might not understand their wounds, that we, instead of saying, "Get over it," "Be strong," "Don't feel the weakness," instead we say, "I don't understand your pain, I don't understand your wounds, but I'm here to listen to you." No matter if you feel that they put a cone on their head and that they deserve it. That does not come into your mind, but instead that they are a child of God, and that they are hurting, and all you think about is, what can I do? How can I show you the love? How can I show you that Christ is the living God in this world that we live in? And that is what the hope is in this text today. That we are not afraid, and that we are valued more than many sparrows. That we have a value to God, that we are just not a number amongst this massive amount of people in this world. That we might think that we are so small, that we do not matter. Yet God says, "You are loved. You are loved so much. And I have created this world, and I have created other people to raise you up and to reach your full potential." Showing weakness, showing vulnerability is not something we should cover up, but should be unveiled to the world, so that we reach our own humanity, our own humility, and for us to be humble enough to say that whatever happens in someone else's life, that doesn't matter, because I am present in your life right now, and I am here to be a disciple of yours. I want you to think about, with your spouse, with your child, with your friend today, maybe even your father, your grandfather, of those wounds that you have carried through your whole life experience. I want you to recognize that pain and recognize why you feel the way that you feel. It is uncomfortable and it is hard. It is something